Yeah. Got it. Okay. Good afternoon.
How do you do? Do I look at you or look at this?
You look at the camera. It's good.
Okay. All right, I'll look at you.
Look at the honor sheet. Thanks for seeing us today. We're here. We're on a mission of diversity, and it's a great honor to speak to you and be able to ask you some questions. Tell us about Cincinnati. Tell us about diversity. Tell us about the museum.
Well, Cincinnati is an interesting city with an amazing history. I'm not a native Cincinnatian. I came here as a resident in 1979 when I was appointed by President Carter to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is situated here. I knew about Cincinnati and had been in and out of the city. It has a very southern exposure, as you can tell. We're right here on the banks of the Ohio River with Kentucky on the other side. This was when we were developing the plans for the Freedom Center, and John Pepper, who was the CEO of Procter & Gamble, and I were going around the country seeking capital funds. I wasn't able to make the pitch because I was on the court, but John Pepper would make the pitch. My role was to talk about the history of Cincinnati, a little bit about civil rights, and to explain why Cincinnati was the logical place to have a Freedom Center. Many persons wonder, well, why Cincinnati? Well, it was Cincinnati because this is where there was more traffic between Kentucky and the south and the north than any other part of the country. There were many crossings took place here on this over this river from Kentucky, and on the streets that you see, that people see over on the to my left here, those were the streets where the slave catchers patrolled, trying to intercept slaves as they made it over to Ohio. And the Fugitive Slave Act was invoked as a justification for making the arrest of the slaves, and also when they could, they would charge the abolitionists who were encouraging the slaves to cross over and who were housing them. The role they played was to have in their windows of their homes a candle, and that was a signal to the slaves that was a safe haven. And the Freedom Center has adopted as its symbol a candle in the window. That's this little pin here. So it was a place where people, once they got to Cincinnati and they could get into one of the homes, they would be protected until they could move on further north. But Cincinnati, it reflected the thinking of the South. We found that the state legislature of Ohio incorporated into its statutes the very segregationist notions that were present throughout the southern states, prohibiting, for instance, spending any funds for education of non-white children. They call them black children or African Americans or mulattoes. And that idea permeated many of the institutions here in Ohio, and certainly those along the banks of the Ohio River, and certainly Cincinnati. So Cincinnati has had this history, and it has lingered for many years. Whereas if you're in another part of the state, up toward Cleveland and Toledo or Akron, you found a different culture. But Cincinnati had separate schools. Dayton, Ohio, had separate schools. And segregation was a part of southern Ohio. And that's why persons would raise the question, well, why would you put a Freedom Center in a community with that kind of a history? But that was the challenge. And we were able to raise funds to establish the center here. The idea was for the center came from a group at the time called the National Conference of Christians and Jews, the Cincinnati chapter. The name has now been changed and it's now called Bridges. It wanted to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the formation of the chapter here in Cincinnati. And it wanted to commemorate that founding of that chapter in some appropriate way. This was also the place where Uncle Tom's Cabin was written, and so we thought that the two things would, made sense. So the chapter discussed putting some sort of a memorial plaque on the banks of the Ohio River, and the feeling was, well, that wouldn't be significant enough; that'd be too small. So as the discussion went forward, the decision was made to seek funds to have a feasibility study conducted. We solicited assistance from Procter & Gamble. John Pepper was president at the time, and he helped solicit funds from other business leaders to assist us in conducting the study. And the report came back that the appropriate way to commemorate the founding of the National Conference of Christians and Jews here in Cincinnati, and also to properly recognize the work reflected in Uncle Tom's Cabin, would be to have a museum. And so we then embarked upon the fundraising. We